I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for March the 9th, 2026. Well, it was a absolute whirlwind weekend for me. I spent most of Saturday at my local Messianic congregation at Chaim of Plano, Texas, had the Shabbat service, and then we had a 2-hour Purim play. And of course, after the Purim play, there was a big giant oneg and everything. And then yesterday, we had the power go in and out in our local community. And that, of course, delayed me doing a number of things which are necessary for Messianic Insider. But nevertheless, we do have some, important news stories to go through. Do keep me in your prayers right now. Just trying to avoid burnout. We got a lot of things, taking place. Wrapping up the 1 Corinthians for the Practical Messianic Edits, Ongoing Salvation on the Line, Volume 1 and 2 combination edits, some other things behind the scenes. And of course, in the spirit, you can feel the ongoing pressure of just what's taking place in the world right now. Now, last week, we started a series on the nations streaming to Zion based in Micah 4, 1-3, and Isaiah 2, 2-4. And we should be finishing that up tomorrow. Before we get into that, and we do try to do this every Monday, please do visit the Messianic Apologetics website, messianicapologetics.net. Here in the right-hand column, you see blog notifications. Be automatically notified by email when Messianic Apologetics is updated. Put your email address in there, hit subscribe, and you'll be asked to confirm. So whenever we post something new or we add something from our ministry archives, you should receive an automatic notification to that. That is different than the emailed announcement list, which you can subscribe to by clicking on the envelope icon in the upper right-hand corner. That's our email announcement list via Constant Contact. Okay. Our theology roundup. We're going to continue with that article. The Torah will go forth from Zion. So go to the Messianic Apologetics website, hit the articles tab, go down to the letter T, almost to the letter U. This is on Micah 4, 1-3, and Isaiah 2, 2-4. And click there and a PDF file will open up. And this is where we left off on Friday. And the question is, as we evaluate these two distinct prophetic oracles, Micah 4, 1-3, and Isaiah 2, 2-4. Okay, find the article there. And then, okay, I didn't realize I hadn't switched over the screen. What instruction is in view here? Because for many of us, every week at our Messianic congregations and synagogues, right before the Torah scroll is brought forth from the ark, we hear that statement, the Torah will go forth from Zion and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, which is taken from this prophecy. And we naturally associate it with Moses' teaching going forth to the world, by extension, the Tanakh scriptures, the Old Testament going forth, and at least recognizing in a general sense that all of God's people can benefit from the instruction of the Tanakh, the Old Testament, the law of Moses, right? That's not what everyone believes. Just instruction. So what instruction? Both Micah 4, 1-3 and Isaiah 2, 2-4 anticipate how the nations are to be brought to Zion to be taught from God's Torah. It is perfectly valid, as witnessed in both the New Jewish Publication Society and Holman Christian Standard Bible renderings, to translate Torah as instruction in these verses. The Torah is God's teaching or instruction. Some interpreters one may encounter, though, have been seen to skew the expectation that the nations will be taught from the law of Moses. And so they have to employ tactics whereby some other quote unquote Torah than the Torah is what will go forth to inaugurate global peace. The dispensational Bible knowledge commentary, for example, actually claims, quote, law, Torah, instruction, not the Mosaic law, will be given in Zion, unquote. On the one hand, you might be able to appreciate the thought that this quote unquote Torah is to be associated with the reign of the Lord. And so it is his law. But ultimately, Moses' teaching did originate with him. While this oracle, delivered via two of God's prophets, anticipates how revelation will come forth from Zion and Jerusalem to change the world, there should be no doubting that this Torah is indeed Moses' teaching. In the Septuagint of both Micah 4:2 and Isaiah 2:3, Torah was rendered with nomos, or law, meaning that what will go forth from Zion will indeed be the Pentateuch. Ancient diaspora Jews or Greek readers examining the Septuagint would have undeniably associated this nomos to be the law of Israel's God. Yet, we are very safe to assume that the Torah, or instruction, which will go forth from Zion, will not include Genesis through Deuteronomy exclusively, and that it will also include instruction coming forth from God's prophets and the Tanakh scriptures in general. Brevard S. Childs describes, quote, indeed, there is a broadening of the term invoked in part by the larger context of an expanding collection of sacred scripture. The subject matter of the prophetic message as divine truth continues to exercise a coercion on Israel, such that the Mosaic Torah itself increasingly received its full meaning from the divine reality witnessed to by the prophets. In a word, both law and prophetic proclamation were expanded in terms of a deepening grasp of God's reality, but neither was subordinated in principle to the other, unquote. This should be fairly easy for believers in Yeshua to understand, as he insisted that he did not just come to fulfill the law, but more specifically, the law and the prophets, Matthew 5:17. Coupling Torah as relating to the Tanakh scriptures, and the fact that in the eschaton it will be the Messiah himself delivering their authoritative interpretation, we are probably also justified to regard the apostolic scriptures, New Testament, as part of the word davar, to be declared. So really, I have not encountered, unless you're dispensational and you really try to separate, there's the law of Moses and there's the law of God, and you try to, compartmentalize the Holy Scriptures. I've never encountered an interpreter, an examiner, a commentator who has thought that the Torah will go forth from Zion is anything other than the law of Moses, right? The teaching of Moses. I have encountered examiners, and I don't have a problem with it, who have considered Torah to involve more than just the 5 books of Moses. They've considered it to involve the prophets, the writings, right? The Tanakh scriptures, the Old Testament, and even to an extent, interpreted messianically, the apostolic scriptures, right? The New Testament. So I've never seen, other than dispensationalists, conclude that Torah in Micah 4:1-3, Isaiah 2:2-4, is anything but the law of Moses. And I think today's Messianic people would agree that it does involve the word going forth. It does involve certainly the prophets, because there are places in the apostolic writings where the law is referred to or quoted, and you see a quotation from the prophets or the writings. So, but just it being generic instruction, that does not do the text justice. And indeed, it's not something which is reflected in current Jewish praxis in the synagogue liturgy. Messianic congregations the world over, again, you probably saw it this weekend when the Torah scroll is brought forth from the ark. the traditional liturgy is the law will go forth from Zion, the Torah will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And that is a declaration, not just regarding the ongoing continuance and importance of Moses' teaching, but it's a declaration to your local assembly as well as to the world, certainly the spirit realm, that prophecy is something very important for the people of God. And when you look out at the demographics, certainly of a Messianic Jewish congregation in the diaspora, and you see a lot of non-Jewish believers in attendance, when that statement is made, you are declaring that what is being witnessed with all those non-Jews there is of the Lord. And indeed, tomorrow, as we wrap up this little mini-series, we're going to discuss the words of the prophets, how some of this might be connected to that statement, which still, as much as I emphasize, look, this is the most important statement of Acts chapter 15, the words of the prophets agree, because it requires Bible readers to go investigate what the Tanakh scriptures say about the nations, the law of Moses, the end times. People are still, in no small part due to some older voices, they're still constrained to think that Acts 15:21 is the most important verse of Acts 15, which it is not. It's Acts 15:15, because regardless how someone approaches or interprets Acts 15:21, Acts 15:21 concerned an ancient first century setting. Acts 15:15, the words of the prophets, that concerns the long-term biblical setting, which we have to reckon with today. And I recommend that if you have not already, that you review my frequently asked question entry on Acts 15:21, and you can see how, in my investigation, in my probing of the Jerusalem Council, even I had to switch from believing that Acts 15:21 was the most important verse to Acts 15:15, mainly because, just like as we went through a number of weeks ago, the different memes that quote one law for the native and the sojourner, and then you actually get into the context and you see that that is one law, lowercase l. It involves specific areas of legislation where the sojourner in ancient Israel could have been taken advantage of. Not to say that non-Jewish believers should not be paying attention to God's Torah. That's what Micah 4:1-3 and Isaiah 2-4 are all about. But just like with the different one law passages, which have been misinterpreted and misapplied, Acts 15:21, regardless of how you take it, that is a first century statement. Moses from ancient generations as those who preach him in the Sabbath every Shabbat, right? Acts 15:15, words of the prophets. That involves things like what we're going through in this little mini series. So we're going to discuss that in more detail tomorrow. Okay, so let's move on to some news now. And we did have a lot of news over the weekend. Of course, we do the news roundup after the theology roundup because the news roundup is time sensitive and it changes from day to day. And with Operation Epic Fury or Operation Roaring Lion, the news is literally changing from hour to hour. So a number of things we're going to go through. They are a little dated. And just as we were getting ready to go live, there were some other things which we'll probably end up having to discuss next time because they involve the geopolitical element of what is happening with this Iranian situation, among others. Now, number one, we need to be praying for peace, Israel, Gaza, the Middle East, Iran, the whole region, right? And along with that, our military personnel, soldiers and sailors, America, its allies, need to pray for the IDF, need to pray for the believers in the region, not just the Messianic Jewish believers, but all the Christians in the region, especially the big underground Christian movement in Iran. Number two, pray for peace, Russia, Ukraine. We don't have so much on that today. And number three, pray for reason and sanity here on the American home front. Not only here in the United States proper, but in the Western Hemisphere. And We do have a number of stories about the ongoing anti-Semitism, which we're seeing in parts of the contemporary church. And a big part of what we have done, going 5 times a week with Messianic Insider, which started Passover 2025. And it takes a lot out of me. This weekend, Whirlwind Weekend, did not get a lot of rest at all. And there's a huge amount of pressure on me to do this because over the past several months, particularly as we returned from the IMCS Rabbis Conference, almost 2 months, just a few days from now, there are not a lot of people in the Messianic community in leadership or in positions of influence, and I mean this with all the love and respect in the world. They are not paying attention to what is going on. They are just not doing that. And while I recognize that at the turn of the millennium, there was a huge amount of date setting, fear mongering, people who capitalized on others' ignorance of the last days. They were coming to very hasty conclusions, and they made a huge name for themselves. They had a huge rise and then a huge fall. Now we're seeing things which we did not see a mere 3 decades ago. Look at all the people just since October the 7th, 2023, who, I was a supporter of Israel. I believed, bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. And now, because of the Gaza situation or whatever, on different online social media influencers, they've now completely turned. They believe that the state of Israel is a demonic counterfeit. The Jewish people are literally the synagogue of Satan. They may not even be real Jews, right? And they're not just getting it from things on the extreme fringe. They're getting it from people, or they're seeing people ask questions like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Megyn Kelly, and others. And then they're just looking into things. They're doing their own research, and they're turning on Israel and the Jewish people. And in the past week, many of us have remembered Purim, the Festival of Lots. How much of this was discussed? I don't want to get presumptuous regarding when we are and start coming out with dates or start saying, this person is the anti-Messiah and we're going to have the third temple, by next year. But we do need to pay attention. And unfortunately, not enough are. Okay. All the news stories I'm about to go through, these are things which I encounter for the most part passively on social media, mainly places like X, Instagram. All of the links should be available for you to look at later today when this episode is archived at messianicapologetics.net. So you can go look at the articles in their entirety, read the different stories, watch the different clips, etc. Okay, our first news story, and this is from March the 7th, so Saturday, from the Jerusalem Post. This was very interesting. You should be, if you're a congregational leader or teacher, you need to read this. Jewish groups ask Pentagon to stop Messianic chaplains from wearing Jewish insignia. Rabbi Lawrence Bazaar, who endorses Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox rabbis and cantors as military chaplains, said Jewish groups are working together on the issue. So you can, of course, look through this article in its entirety, but it mentioned, just right off the bat, the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations, which endorses Messianic chaplains. So some of you all, about the UMJC, whether you like it or not, is not the point. The point is that they've got a number of military chaplains, people who look to the UMJC for their ordination, their approval, serving in the U.S. military. Here you see the traditional insignia of U.S. military chaplains, the 10 Commandments with the Star of David on it. Talks about, this article, Messianic movement engaged in heavily deceptive behavior. And basically, it's the belief that, Jews are Jews and Christians are Christians, and these are pretty much just Christians. And a number of the the article mentions Barney Kasdan, a leader of the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations, who oversees the group's military chaplaincy endorsements, said Messianic chaplains identify as Jews and therefore wear the same insignia as other Jewish chaplains. Now, this article mentions how the Messianic Jewish chaplains are open to having their own distinct insignia, right? The Christians have a cross. the Jews, 10 Commandments to the Star of David. Maybe the Messianic chaplains need their own insignia, but there are only like 5 Messianic chaplains in the U.S. military. And as I said, whether you like the UMJC or not, and I generally do not, I definitely believe that Messianic Jewish chaplains should be permitted to serve in the U.S. military, any military. But if they have to be their own specific thing, then let's hope that they can become their own specific thing. But that's a good thing for you to keep in mind, because chaplains are there whether they are Jewish, Christian, something else. They're generally there to offer words of comfort, words of support, words of solace to our men and women serving in uniform. Okay. Next story. This is from March the 7th, Visegrad 24, and there's an 11-second clip. This is from 1:57 a.m. The president of the Islamic regime in Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, has released a message in which he says there won't be any more Iranian attacks on neighboring states unless there are attacks on Iran from those states. Yeah, one of the big questions is, okay, in the initial first week of Epic Fury, Roaring Lion, why did the Iranian government, fire back at all these other countries which didn't strike them directly, right? And they didn't just limit it to, for example, U.S. military or allied military installations in those countries. What were the Iranians, thinking? Or, did their hardware, did their equipment malfunction? Because all it would do is turn some of these governments against the Islamic Republic. Okay, our next story. This is from Visegrad 24, and this has hit a number of different news outlets by now. 2:16 a.m. on Saturday, the U.S. is sending a third aircraft carrier strike group to the Middle East. The USS George H.W. Bush will join the USS Abraham Lincoln and USS Gerald R. Ford. And yes, there's also talk about other countries sending naval assets into the region. Of course, if the Bush is on the way to the region, it's going to take a more offensive role. Some of these other, allied forces are going to take a more defensive role. From Visegrad 24, 4:43 a.m., March the 7th, and there's a 4-minute, 23-second clip here. Iran's Crown Prince Pahlavi Reza says the Iranian people have asked him to lead the transition once the Islamic Republic falls, and he has accepted. He said his goal is to ensure orderly transition of power, free elections. So you can watch the clip in greater detail. And that is not a huge surprise, excuse me, that the exiled Crown Prince is now widely being acknowledged as the main person to oversee a transition from an Islamic Republic to whatever the next successor state is going to be. And there continues to be speculation as to whether that's going to be a constitutional monarchy, democratic republic, some kind of federation, something else. The main thing I would stress in terms of the end time scenario, and I've said this before, but this is what I don't think often processes with a lot of people, because, going back to the late 1990s, going back 30 years, many of us have been conditioned to think it's all going to hit now. It's all going to hit. And that is what, of course, when you see a lot of the people who are paying attention to what's going on in the end times, that's the impression you get. And how much of that is realistic? The Lord himself said in his Olivet Discourse, it would be like the birth pains of a woman. And a woman goes through various phases of labor when she's giving birth. And labor, it's painful, and then it lets up for a while. It's painful, and then it lets up for a while. And then it gets quicker and quicker and quicker until the moment of delivery. We have to look at what's going on with this Iranian situation in the same way. Oh, the Islamic Republic falls? we will be undoubtedly taking some giant leaps forward toward the second coming. But is it going to be, a year after that? No, of course not. It's going to be one, major labor pain. Then we're going to go into a series of just, and a period of rebuilding and a period of, letting the dust settle and letting some of the puzzle pieces or some of the chess pieces get reorganized. While, the country of Iran has undoubtedly, since the 1979 revolution, been like maybe the world's number one sponsor of terrorism. You remove that from the scene, it doesn't mean all terrorism, all of that bad stuff goes away. It just, they scatter and they go other places. Likewise, what is going to happen to Islamic extremism if the Islamic Republic of Iran falls? It could go through a season of being significantly discredited, because my personal opinion, and this isn't too popular in some quarters, I think more frequently than not, it just hasn't been considered yet. While we have seen the pendulum swing from, people believing in some kind of a European Union, European beast, to some kind of a United Nations beast, to now some kind of an Islamic beast. If Islam, particularly Islamic extremism, if it gets discredited as a result of Operation Roaring Lion, Operation Epic Fury, I'm much more inclined to be on the side of the ethereal, almost new age beast, where, yes, Islam has a place in that, but it's not the kind of radical jihad where the only way to confront it is to blow up the Dome of the Rock and then forcibly build the third temple. No, this is much more of a, and we've talked about this. You look at the thing they've got in the United Arab Emirates with a mosque, a church, and a synagogue built right next to each other. It's much more of a, all paths lead to God. Look to the God inside of you. And the beast being someone who, yes, he's going to declare himself God and demand worship, but probably also be the kind who, wears the white suit. I'm saying that figuratively, but, I'm here to bring you to a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of evolution. That's what I am more inclined to think. I'm here to invite you to join the universe as we figure out who we are and all of this. I'm much more along the lines of the ethereal beast. I could be wrong, but that's something I think you'll be hearing more and more and more about. Okay, from Instagram. And this is from Newsmax. This is a post from the president over the weekend where he said, Iran, which is being beat to hell, has apologized and surrendered to its Middle East neighbors and promised that it will not shoot at them anymore. This promise was only made because of the relentless U.S. and Israeli attack. They were looking to take over and rule the Middle East. It is the first time that Iran has ever lost in thousands of years to surrounding Middle Eastern countries. And there's more you can go into there. But of course, we're talking about the Islamic Republic. And it's already, from what we can tell, started to really not work for them. Okay, there are a number of different clips which have circulated on social media the past weekend regarding Tucker Carlson. Here is one of them, passed on by Clash Report. Tucker Carlson, 1 minute, 7 seconds. Israel is one of the ugliest countries in the world. They have built nothing of beauty since 1948. Of course, one of the initial pictures is here. Take a look at this. And that's part of modern Israel. That is, of course, his opinion. He's welcome to his opinion. Others would say, have you seen pictures of Palestine from the Ottoman Empire? How just kind of decrepit, rundown it was. A lot of swamps, a lot of malaria, all this. And look at what the government of Israel has done in making the desert bloom. Now, there's no question that, Tucker Carlson and visiting various Islamic countries in the Middle East, that they too have built, impressive infrastructure, impressive buildings, impressive skyscrapers from the desert as well. I got to be fair, but to say that Israel has not produced anything of beauty. That is, I mean, he's welcome to that opinion. I hope for the best everyone in the region and that they all get integrated economically, because once you get integrated economically, that lessens the chance of warfare and violence. From Carrie Prejean Baller, and this was posted 8:44 a.m. on Saturday, March the 7th. Here, reposting something from Robert Kearney. While American evangelicals are busy flailing on the floor demanding Trump commit to a massive military operation in order to fulfill biblical prophecy, the Catholic Pope is calling for peace and de-escalation of this senseless conflict. And then she simply repeats, you can look at all this in your spare time, but while dispensationalist, warmongering Zionists lay hand on POTUS, President of the United States, and pray for war to fulfill their false theological fantasies, our Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV, calls the world to peace. Her conclusion: one message is heresy, the other is Christianity. And then she goes and concludes later down, Protestantism fractured the faith into endless competing doctrines, now openly pushing for war in the hope of forcing the second coming of Christ. Now, Carrie Prejean Baller, she's welcome to her opinion. She is not a supporter of Zionism. She's really not a supporter of the state of Israel. She believes that Roman Catholicism is the one true faith. To be fair, we know that not all Roman Catholics see things her way, and that they do affirm some kind of a brotherhood with the Jewish people, and that they would affirm some level of continuance for God's promises to the ethnic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's also very, very true that there are a lot of more traditional Catholics who do not see things that way. And yeah, to blame Protestantism, that's just a low blow. But this is doubtlessly not the last post like this we're going to see from Carrie Prejean Baller. But the reason we mention this is because these are the kinds of things which influence young people in your sphere of influence. And while it's easy to say, oh, anti-Semitism is on the rise, anti-Semitism is on the increase, oh, woe are we, woe are we. Okay, but what are they reading? What are they listening to? Things like this. And while someone like her is a lost cause, you know, she's beyond all hope. What about that person sitting in your congregation, perhaps this past weekend, perhaps not, who is scrolling on their phone and they see something like this, and they see that their Messianic congregational leader or rabbi isn't talking about this, isn't addressing it? Well, when you don't address it in that vacuum, it's very possible that people will be influenced by this. See, I'm very practical. I'm not thinking about, you know, seeing the tide of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism completely reversed. No, we know where the Holy Scriptures tell us we're going. The world's going to turn against Israel and the Jewish people. But I am concerned about those people in our sphere of influence, people who are our family members, our friends, people we care about, people who might be visiting our congregations and synagogues. How do we prevent them from going in the wrong direction? They're not going to be prevented if we avoid the problem. Okay. Here's a really good post by Dan Bermawi, March the 7th. And there's a 28-second clip here, and it mostly deals with James Tallarico, who is the Democratic candidate for Senate here in the state of Texas. He says, the church left the public square because it did not want to be defiled by politics. And that vacuum is now being filled by degenerates like this who present themselves as Christians. If this is the Christianity involved in the public square, then a confident ideology like Islam will easily take over. So, yes, we have to, in this very interesting, tense, and you can feel the tension, you know, you can really feel it right now. In this very interesting, tense season, we have to cry on God to fill us with His Holy Spirit and give us the oomph we need, the ability to cancel fear, reject phobia, and to address the issues which are affecting all of us, and especially the younger people. And we're not going to do that by, well, if it gets really bad, the Lord will just, beam us out of here via the pre-trib rapture. No, we have an opportunity to make sure that nobody gets caught up in the wake of the growing apostasy and the growing slide into the abyss. All right, from the New York Post, and this is March the 8th, so this is yesterday. The headline, Trump claims Iran will be hit very hard today, says some groups under serious consideration for complete destruction and certain death. So yeah, this is from a mainstream news source here. President Trump warned that Iran would be hit very hard on Saturday as the U.S. forces Operation Epic Fury enters into its second week. Trump deemed that the Iranian regime was no longer the bully of the Middle East after Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian apologized for attacking its Gulf neighbors. Okay, and we referenced that post earlier. Now, this is the kind of thing which can change from hour to hour, not just day to day. But yeah, the president's rhetoric is will hit very hard. That's on Saturday, and of course, we've seen some signs that that was something which was definitely carried through. All right, our next story. Okay, this is from the Christian Post. This is definitely worth a read, especially if you're a Messianic congregational leader or rabbi. Now, it is from the author is Ryan Dobson. That's James Dobson's son. But the headline, anti-Semitism is growing in the church. Something has gone wrong. Now, as I skimmed through this article again today, here is something that really caught my eye. And that's just a kind of a repeat of a number of things, even mentions October the 7th. But here, he talks about, I posted, this is from this past December. He walked through Jerusalem, stood at the empty tomb, visited the Nova massacre site, met families who lost children on October the 7th. Dobson says, then I posted a simple photo of myself standing beside the Israeli flag. Okay, so this is from a visit he and his wife went to Israel. Within minutes, my comments and inbox were filled with something I did not expect. Anger, not political debate, not engagement, something darker. Ryan Dobson, the attacks didn't come from secular critics. They came from self-described Bible-believing Christians. One ministry leader messaged me publicly, "You're an idiot." A woman commented, "If the Jews haven't found Christ in 2,000 years, then we're the new chosen people." Ryan Dobson, I was stunned. I was raised in a family that believed Christians should honor the people through whom the scriptures came, but what I witnessed online suggested something has shifted. And you can read the article in its entirety. It goes into some of the statements made by Paul, etc., which we are all familiar with. Yes, something has shifted post October the 7th, 2023. And a lot of Christians, more customary evangelicals, the type who were reared in the evangelicalism of the 1980s and 1990s, which I miss it so much, it's not even funny. This past week, March the 5th, I remembered what would have been my father's 75th birthday. I mean, what has happened in the past 34 years since he passed away? Yeah, I mean, anti-Semitism is on the rise among Bible-believing Christians. And it's just like, if they haven't accepted Christ as their Messiah in the past 2,000 years, well, we're definitely now the new chosen people. And along with that, I have been monitoring on X some of the conclusions of, a lot of people who were impacted by, post October the 7th. And, there's a definite trend that, a lot of them were supportive of Israel, supportive of the Jewish people, but then they accepted a lot of the mainstream propaganda. Israel is committing genocide. If Israel wanted to commit genocide, nobody would be alive in Gaza. The IDF put out alerts to people's phones. They dropped leaflets, move from this area as we deal with the terrorists here. And of course, a lot in the mainstream media didn't pick up on that. But a lot of people, they don't think independently as much as they should. They fell for that. And then very quickly, and in no small part due to the enemy raising up a number of social media influencers, now they've bought into the lines that not only is the church the new Israel, but the Ashkenazic Jewish community, they're Khazar imposters, and Zionism is this great evil, even though in its most basic sense, it just means that the Jewish people have a right to a homeland, the land promised to their ancestors in the Bible. And yeah, we got to be aware of this. We've got to be prepared to navigate some of these things and not just shake our head. Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. No, these are road signs regarding when we are. And yes, they are serious and they are very severe. And we have to pray every day for the Lord to give us wisdom and discernment to know what is truth, what is error, but also to prepare us for a future which a lot of people are not prepared for. A lot of people are not thinking about it. The day when it was popular, in vogue to be an evangelical Protestant and support Israel, support the Jewish people, stand against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, that is on the decline, and it's becoming more and more inconvenient for people like me, families like mine, to stand with their Messianic Jewish brothers and sisters. All right, our next story. This is from Vivid on X, posted 6:40 p.m. March the 7th, so Saturday. 42-second clip. This is very important to give you an idea about the dynamics changing in Iran. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, he said, I went to Israel to show that we are the descendants of Cyrus the Great, who 25 centuries ago helped free the Jewish people and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And Vivid's conclusion, I can't wait for the alliance between Israel and a free Iran. Yes. And look, in the short term, I think that's going to be something which we are likely to see happen. I think there are going to be some other things that which come forth from that, which are related to the end time scenario. But in the long term, it's going to just reshift the Middle East and get some, I think, more of the global elements of the end times in motion in a way we haven't seen before. Okay, here's an important post from Hananya Naftali. Many of you all have encountered his post before. I've seen him at a number of MJAA events. This was posted yesterday. Have you noticed how churches have gone silent about Israel? God's promises to Israel didn't expire. His word didn't change. And he talks about a new initiative. But the main point is, have you noticed how churches have gone silent about Israel? Now, there are a lot of people on social media now who found that different grifters found that Jew hate, hatred of Israel, it gets you a lot of clicks and it gets you a lot of attention. Jew support for Israel, not so much. Okay, from Visegrad 24, yesterday, March the 8th, the conclusion of this little video clip is apocalyptic footage from Tehran following Israeli strikes on major oil depots. So yeah, that's intense. Now, some of the apocalyptic language, that's a little over the top for me, but we know that things are going on. We know that in due time that I just think it's only a matter of time before the Islamic Republic collapses. Now, this is kind of off the subject, but you probably have seen a number of social media posts about this as well. Of course, it was just a little over 2 months ago that Nicolas Maduro, president of Venezuela, was apprehended, and the U.S. is now having more, normalized relations with Venezuela, and Venezuelan oil is being able to reach the U.S. market. But some of y'all may have seen some of the pictures of, this is the type of Venezuelan crude oil. It's very thick. It has to be refined very heavily, and a lot of it's only good for like machine oil or more industrial types of capacities, whereas the Iranian oil is much thinner and it's more ideal to be refined for gasoline, vehicles, and for someone who's not a geologist, certainly not a petroleum geologist, I found that kind of fascinating. A lot of us, we just think oil and we think, petroleum, and we just kind of think it's all this black stuff. A lot of us don't think about the thickness, the consistency, what can be used for, different energy products, what can be used for different chemicals. We just think basically the price at the pump. And we are not as familiar as we should be with the refinement process. So, yeah, and of course, a lot of the oil which comes from the Middle East, it has that much thinner consistency. It's intended for vehicular use. All right, our next story, back to what's happening in the religious world, but this is from the Times of Israel, March the 8th, yesterday. U.S. right-wing schism over anti-Semitism puts Christ is king at center of culture war. And the byline phrase has increasingly been used by far-right figures as a hate meme targeting Jews, even as others use it as a sincere declaration of faith. Okay, so that's fair. I mean, obviously, Christ is king is an important part of a believer's declaration of faith. We believe that Messiah is king, but it has been used in many contexts to support extreme right-wing and anti-Semitic activities. But this is a good article, good to read. Talks about, it's pretty fair, pretty evenly handed, but it talks about Candace Owens, mentions Carrie Prejean Baller and her position on Zionism, America First. Scroll down a little bit, talks about Nick Fuentes, and there's some other things which, we need to be taking significant note of as today's Messianic community. And yet, how many people I'll be easy, how many people who are in congregational leadership at the second tier, they're a deacon, they're one of the Shamashim. Do they know who Nick Fuentes is? Do they know who Carrie Prejean Baller is? If you're a Messianic congregational leader or rabbi at this point in March of 2026, and you don't know who some of these people are, and you don't know some of the vitriol that they're putting out there, then you need to get familiar very, very quickly, because it's only a matter of time before the next person gets turned over. I mean, we're watching Megyn Kelly right now, and we have a post regarding her in just a few moments. But things are getting uncertain, worrisome. From 2CTV, this is from March the 8th at 8:57 yesterday. Iran's opposition leader, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, has published the transition government plan after the fall of the Islamic occupation. Of course, Tusi is an Iranian expatriate in London. This includes a referendum on the system of governance and the constitution. The roadmap is detailed in a 178-page document. And here's some graphics demonstrating that. But the good thing to note is, and of course, this is going to be doubtlessly change as time moves on, but the main thing to keep in mind is that there is a plan in place for a transition from the Islamic Republic to some other form of government. I'm expecting there to be a constitutional republic with the Crown Prince as the new Shah. Could it be a democratic republic, as you see in other Western countries? Yes. Is there going to be some kind of a federal system, especially given the ethnic groups in the country of Iran? Probably. But one of the things I would take note of is the fact that we're already hearing about a potential future government of Iran and how it would be structured. Is we really didn't see this in 2003, 23 years ago, with the invasion of Iraq. Okay, from open source intel, yesterday, 9:33 a.m., March the 8th, and there's an 18-second clip from Meet the Press. U.S. envoy to the United Nations, Mike Waltz. Our Gulf allies at the UN are outraged and will take military and diplomatic action in the coming days and weeks. This whole strategy of Iran shooting in all directions at their neighbors and our allies is backfiring. So even though the president of Iran came out and said, no, we're not going to fire anymore on our, Arab neighbors, at least as of yesterday, this is something which has infuriated these different Arab neighbors. And it's only going to increase their resolve to possibly get involved in this conflict directly. Okay, another one, excuse me, passed on from open source intel. yesterday at 11:23 a.m. 40-second clip. There you see Maria Bartiromo talking to Lindsey Graham, who's holding up a ball cap which says "Free Cuba." Bad actors across the world are realizing President Trump is unlike any other leader that came before him. Peace is on the horizon, all thanks to Trump. And while right now a lot of our attention is focused on the Operation Epic Fury, which I would remind some of you, from the U.S. standpoint, yes, removing the Islamic Republic's a good thing. Opening up Iranian energy to a wider Western market, that's a good thing. The U.S. also has bigger geopolitical elements in mind, particularly as it involves cutting off China from bargain basement energy from Iran, which then, of course, affects the Chinese economy, Chinese factories. Can they manufacture cheap products and flood the market? That undercuts the West, it undercuts the United States. And of course, if China has any aspirations regarding Taiwan, they've got to have a lot of energy, and it cuts them off from building up their war machine. So we need to remember that. Now, with that said, you're beginning to hear some things about Cuba. Remember, Cuba was getting a lot of its energy from Venezuela, a lot of its economic resources from Venezuela. What's going to happen in Cuba now? Our attention is focused on Iran, but Cuba's right in our backyard. And just like with the Iranian Revolution of 1979, the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, the communists, that's something which is very important to a lot of Americans, not just Cuban expatriates, but what it has done to the whole Cold War effect, after Cold War effect, and everything else. Okay, our next story, and this is passed on by Eric Dougherty on X, 12:18 p.m. yesterday, 1 minute, 20-second clip. Boom, Senator John Kennedy lays the hammer. We're going to turn parts of Iran, those who are our enemies, into fish food and then get out. I do not believe the president sends in troops. And Senator Kennedy, if he sends in troops, the thud you will hear will be me face planting because I fainted. I think this will all take a matter of weeks. And the conclusion of Eric Dougherty's unconditional surrender will be forced by 47. That's John Kennedy, the senator from Louisiana. Okay, these are the kinds of things which change right now, not only day by day, but hour by hour. But yeah, Senator Kennedy is a strong supporter of the president. And I would stress he probably knows things that people in the general public do not know. Okay, our next story. This is from the New York Post. Yesterday, Kansas City International Airport evacuated over threat as FBI cops swarm terminal. And that is a situation which appears to be resolved. I'll let you all look into that in more detail. Likewise, I need to mention how when I was during the middle of my Shabbat service on Saturday morning, there was the whole issue of the Southwest Airlines flight, which was flying from Fort Lauderdale to Nashville, Tennessee, and had to land in Atlanta. That's another thing which took place over the weekend. And there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of speculation as to, with this ongoing situation in Iran, Epic Fury, Roaring Lion, are there going to be any terrorist sleeper cells awakened to do bad things? And of course, this is why we pray for peace, we pray for protection, and while we all have to be on the lookout for suspicious matters. But yeah, I would expect there to be some more stories like this over the next few weeks, but we're glad that everyone appears to be relatively safe. Okay, from the Epic Times yesterday, the headline, Cuba is negotiating deal with U.S., Trump says. I would think a deal would be made very easily with Cuba, Trump said. And of course, it does not escape our notice that our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he is a son of people who fled Cuba after the revolution. So, of course, I think he was a brilliant selection for Secretary of State just because he's fluent in Spanish and he can communicate with everyone in Latin America, much more easily than others. And it was an indication that his selection, that the Trump administration was going to put a lot of time and a lot of attention into Latin America. So we do pray for the people of Cuba. I've said this before when I lived in Central Florida. A lot of people at my local Messianic congregation, they were from Cuba or they had family in Cuba. In fact, the congregational leader's wife was from Cuba and had left after the revolution. Other people were from Venezuela and they had left because of Chavez. So we pray for the believers and we pray that hopefully something good can come out of the Cuban situation. All right, from 2C TV, we got a number of stories regarding this. This was the first one I saw, 4:22 p.m. yesterday. Breaking: Islamic Republic confirms Mojtaba Khamenei has become the new supreme leader. And 2C's conclusion: expect an internal conflict inside the regime. So this was, of course, the son of Ayatollah Khamenei. He did recently lose a number of his family members, including his wife, his daughter, in the Israeli bombings. So is he going to be more moderate than his father, or is he going to be more of a hardliner? All the indications point to him being more of a hardliner. All right, so here's another story regarding this. This is from Al Jazeera on X, and there's a 2-minute, 56-second clip. Iran names Khamenei's son as new supreme leader after father's killing, just over a week after the assassination of his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in United States-Israeli strikes that plunged the region into a sprawling war. So that's from the other side, Al Jazeera. So we've got a side that's definitely anti-Iranian, now one that's at least neutral to the Iranian regime. Okay, we got 5 more stories and then we'll conclude. Okay, another one. This is from Fox News. Yesterday at 5:09 p.m., Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of slain Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has been named Iran's new supreme leader. Over the years, Mojtaba was seen constantly with his father and regarded as an influential figure behind the scenes. He has been sanctioned by the U.S. since 2019 for representing his father in an official capacity, despite never being elected or appointed to a government position. So he's been there, but with his father as the Ayatollah, we are expecting him to have much more of a hardline position. And we're not expecting him to be the Ayatollah as long as his father was either. All right. Now, a big part of course, what's happening right now involves the economics of Operation Epic Fury, Operation Roaring Lion. So from the president, Fox News passed this on yesterday at 6:41 p.m. Crude awakening. President Trump said rising oil prices tied to the conflict with Iran are a very small price to pay for global safety and peace, predicting prices will fall once the nuclear threat is eliminated. So the president is saying that, yes, in the short term, you're probably going to see a rise in oil prices. It's going to affect the price at the pump, but that's only going to be for the short term. Once the Iranian nuclear threat is over, oil prices will go back down. Gas will be much more affordable. And that's where you see other posts related, and I mentioned this, where you see the different types of oil, the different types of petroleum. The type that comes from Venezuela is very thick, much thinner. The type which comes from Iran, and then other things are in between. I'm not a petroleum engineer. I don't pretend to know how petroleum is refined and what can be mixed together and what's best for more of an industrial machine application or what's for vehicular use. Okay. we got 3 more stories. This is from 60 Minutes. Yesterday, 6:46 p.m., and there's a 2-minute, 14-second clip. Some of the president's supporters have criticized him, suggesting Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu pulled the U.S. into a war that, to their minds, did not put the U.S. interests first. Of course, we've seen that a lot. I see how President Trump operates and what he's putting first, and it's America, responds Secretary Pete Hegseth. So there are a lot of people, not only on the left, but even on the right. But I think those of us who monitor social media, we encounter them from the right. The Marjorie Taylor Greens, Thomas Massey types out there. Certainly, we encounter different clips from Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and what have you. But I believe that the president is operating in an America First mindset, but I can definitely see how others would come to a different conclusion. Okay, I thought we were going to have the story from, let me check something. Okay, that's for tomorrow. It came on just as we were getting ready to go. It has to do with Tucker Carlson and an interview by Megyn Kelly. I think I referred to that earlier, but it'll be better for tomorrow because we'll see what other things come out. Okay, now this was the story which came across my feed in the middle of the night, and I just thought it was classic, absolute classic, because many of us, as we have looked at the Middle East, we've looked at the negotiations, we have seen the role that Qatar has played. And yes, I know last time I said I heard that the correct pronunciation was Qatar, but this was an interview with the Qatari prime minister, and he said Qatar. So my palate is still used to saying Qatar. But this was an interview that the prime minister of Qatar had, prime minister and foreign minister, had with Sky News. And this is what, and there's 1 minute, 22-second clip. Qatar's prime minister and foreign minister, Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani. It's a big sense of betrayal. This is the second time. It appeared to have been pre-planned. Once the war started, maybe just an hour after it began, the Gulf countries were attacked right away. Before this war, all of us repeatedly said that we would not take part in any attacks or wars against our neighbors. Excuse me. We wanted to see a peaceful neighborhood. We were helping Iran and the United States reach diplomatic solutions. But this miscalculation by the Iranians to attack the Gulf countries has destroyed everything. So I know that a lot of people have questions about Qatar, their role with the Gaza situation, now their role with the Iranian situation. The Qatari prime minister, foreign minister himself, feels betrayed by Iran because Iran attacked Qatar. Absolutely classic. And what this means is that, yes, Qatar has a lot to answer for. A number of them have a lot to answer for. But the Islamic Republic attacking Qatar, among others, is only going to backfire. And indeed, while you've got countries like Israel and the United States leading the way in wanting to see the Islamic Republic overthrown, what about some of these other regional, neighborly Islamic countries? Are they going to play any role in seeing the Islamic Republic overthrown because they're a threat to them? We continue to wait and see. But that's really just a classic story. Okay, now we're going to close with this one, and this one is rather serious. Excuse me. This has been reposted from Jordan Wells. He's a Christian minister, very strong supporter of Israel. Reposted this meme. 45% of young Republicans see Jews as a threat. And of course, there's a picture of Tucker Carlson. Thank you very much. And you can read all of his commentary later, but this is what he says. A shocking new study reveals that, excuse me, 45% of Republicans under 44 believe Jews pose a threat to the American way of life, nearly double the 23% among those over 45. This isn't just a statistic, it's a massive generational divide that's fueling rising anti-Semitism on the right. How did we get there? Influencers like Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, the self-avowed racist and white supremacists, have been pushing isolationist anti-Israel narratives laced with conspiracy theories that paint Jews as outsiders or manipulators. Their reach on social media and podcasts has normalized hate among young conservatives who aren't hearing the counter message. Then he goes into some Bible passages and some other things. But yes, if you are not paying attention to this and you are in today's Messianic community, which has invoked upon itself the end time move of God, and you're not paying attention to this as road signs regarding the end times, then it's high time that you get up to speed. It's high time that you get updated regarding what is going on. Because even though people like Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, others, they're just a lost cause. People who you love, family members, friends, people who attend your congregations, visitors to your congregations, they're not a lost cause, but you have to acknowledge that this is going on and you have to address it. And you got to address it in much more detail than just, I will bless those who bless you, Genesis 12:3. Now, over the weekend, Saturday evening, I did spend a little bit of time just not really having a powwow with the Lord, but just kind of praying, okay, what are some future things on our agenda? And maybe that's the reason I've been so caught up and so exhausted. But it's like, here are a number of things, we've got files open on. One of them would involve, how do we sort through anti-Semitism, replacement theology as Messianic people? But also, how do we remember the mission we're on? Because a lot of people who attend Messianic congregations and synagogues, it's either about, well, I'm just here because I'm a Jewish believer in Yeshua and I'm here to preserve my Jewishness. Well, okay, that's good and that's important, but why are you here? What's the Messianic mission? What are we here to do? A lot of non-Jewish people who are in the sphere of influence, well, I'm just here to keep Torah because, the final verse of Ecclesiastes, fear God and keep his commandments. Well, okay, those are good things, but that's not a complete window, or that's a very small window of what God intends for us. And so how we are able to have a better grasp on what's going on, why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing. That's why we've got Messianic Insider 5 times a week. That's why I know many of you all join me in what I like to call the ongoing conversation. And already we've got a number of stories which we're going to be discussing tomorrow, which just highlight why we need to be in prayer, why we need to be paying attention, and why we really need to be pressing in to the Lord. And hopefully, over the past week, regardless of when or how you remembered Purim, the Festival of Lots, the Esther story, hopefully you got a little more than just a nice dramatic presentation and a nice remembrance that God saved Israel. He saved the Jewish people via the work of Esther. Hopefully you got a reminder of some of these things have begun to manifest themselves again. And it's blatantly obvious to anybody who goes on X, Instagram, some sources. It's not that difficult to find. I hope that we will, in the coming weeks and months, have a much more greater appreciation for the times in which we live, the freedoms we have to speak out, and the wonderful God we serve, who is giving us an advanced warning of things to come. Okay. As always, on behalf of Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and support for all of our ministry efforts. Please do consider signing up for a monthly $25 or $50 donation. If you have not already, be sure to give this episode a thumbs up or a heart. So it will definitely help our exposure on social media. Repost this episode to social media, your feeds, Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram. Forward this on to a friend. Those of you who subscribe to the automatic notification. That's excellent post to forward on via email. And please do visit my website, messianicapologetics.net, where you can access a wide array of articles, frequently asked questions, entries, different back issues of Outreach Israel News, back episodes of Messianic Insider, different McKee moment shorts, and generally you can take a look at our ministry adventures over the years. We will see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.